Hello, guys. Tonight we are live. Carnivore Muscle Ramblings, segment number 66. Where myself, Jerome Armstrong, and other featured guests will be on here to talk about all things bodybuilding, fitness, fat loss, muscle gain related. Feel free to also ask any other questions that you might need answers to related to other things. We can answer other stuff as well. But we do try to keep this one slightly bodybuilding orientated. So it does apply to anyone looking to improve their body composition, regardless of how that might be. Anyway, Jerome, how have you been the last few weeks? I haven't seen you in a little while.
I've been busy. I apologize for my absence. My daughter's had like 3 of the last 4 Mondays off of school, and then I think the one Monday she was supposed to go to school, there was inclement weather. We got something like 15 inches of snow over the course of a week. So it's been a hot minute since I've been here, but joining you guys from my crammed size of a tuna can house, and I'm looking forward to today.
Yeah, me too. It's always a good sign to see you on here, and I appreciate the weather and other stuff and life stuff has got in the way. I nearly forgot about tonight. Luckily, Sophie reminded me a couple of hours ago, so there we go. I have reminders for everything on my phone, but this is one of those things I just didn't look at. But anyway, I just want to say thank you first and foremost to Camden Waters, who kindly joined as a YouTube channel member. That is greatly appreciated. We do have a lot of good stuff on the channel for carnivore bodybuilding related. That is a member section only stuff, so I recommend looking at that for sure. You'd be quite surprised how much content is on there, considering what you get for your money. So for an extra, what is it? I think it's £1, just over $1 worth. Each month, you get loads of good, useful, informative content clips. Some stuff is purely members only. I won't release it to the public just because, need some novelty and a bit of what's the word? A bit of suspense about what's in there as well. But I do solidly recommend looking into it. Even Jerome's a channel member, which is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
One of the longest serving channel members, I believe, something like 10 or 11 months at this point, which is quite cool.
To me, it's the getting to preview videos before everybody else that is one of my favorite things. Sometimes Jonathan will tease me with a message letting me know that he has a video upcoming, and I get so excited to see it that to me, the not even $5 a month that I spend on a channel membership is well worth it.
That's cool, yeah. And I do put some useful things in there as well. For example, this past week, you guys may have not have known, but I did produce the ebook that Jerome and I have wrote together, and we put that out in an audio format. Some of the words, I'd say maybe one or two words are inaccurate, where they use words like rendition or something rather than repetition. I don't know why the software did that, but if you can get your head past the one or two words it does, pronounce incorrectly, then there's a good 4+ hours of content on there, and everything in that 4-hour audiobook is in the book itself. So perhaps I know a lot of people that listen to this, they're not bookworms, they don't read stuff. You can listen to it while you're driving to work, on the way back, on a bus, traveling on a long journey. So it's useful to get some extra information in. But yeah, it's very dense of information. We spent probably, I don't know, over 100 hours writing it, I'd imagine, probably more. I know Jerome certainly spent a good amount of time doing it between clients at work and stuff. So I certainly recommend looking at that and checking that out. Otherwise, I just wanted to mention Jerome's channel as well, which is Jerome Armstrong. I believe I have put a link to the channel in the description box below. If I haven't already, let me know, and I can obviously tag him in it, and you can follow him from there. He's working his way up to 1,000 subscribers at the moment. He puts out content quite similar to me, but much more long format presentation style. So if you really want to get into the weeds about something, he looks through the studies, the science as it tells us, and evaluates things from his perspective, but also just presents it as it is, which is really helpful. Very clear and concise information, but also lots of it, which is actually great to see.
I appreciate the shout out. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. We're going to be answering some questions tonight, but just first and foremost, I think I've already said that tonight, I'm going to put up my update pictures for the past week, which is something I said I'd do on my channel as my contest I'm proposing to do approaches. So this is just my contest stuff. This is week 2 of my, you might call it a fat loss phase. I'm not too handy with the technology, but yeah, you can basically see what I've achieved so far. Not too bad. A bit more definition in the legs. The waist has come in about 1/2 inch in the last week. I've got more definition around the biceps. triceps and a bit of striation through the shoulders coming through. Other than that, not much to tell really, because quite furry. You know, the lighting's not what you call optimized. It's not lighting to, you know, show off on Instagram. It's just pure, honest lighting from natural daylight. But that's where I stand at the moment, 2 weeks into my contest preparations. Diet so far has been quite easy to adhere to. I've given myself a macronutrient range for now. I am looking at deploying and I'd say just a bodybuilding coach to help me get through it. I previously didn't see the value in a coach, but being a coach myself, I can see the value. And from the point of, you know, telling other people what to do all the time, or what I recommend to people, what suggested advice, it's quite easy for me to say, but putting it to practice, sometimes you just get a bit overwhelmed with it. And sometimes it's a bit easier to get someone else to take the thought process out of it. So that's something I will be doing in the near future, pending. So it depends if I am able to compete. Anyway, that's basically the physique right now. Jerome, are you doing a show this year at all?
Yeah, there's ironically, it's the day before your show. I think it's June 1st, 2024 here in my home state of Wisconsin. There's the Shredded Cheddar. What a fantastic name for a bodybuilding show. So preparations are going well. It's, again, same thing. Usually early on, there's not too terribly much to report on, but behind the scenes, I'm documenting quite a bit.
That's cool to see. Yeah, the data is interesting because you can notice trends in what you do. What's interesting now is this current contest prep, I'm struggling more with fat loss around the midsection as opposed to the rest of my body. So my hamstrings, glutes, I'd say like my upper body in general, arms maybe have got quite a bit leaner, but it used to be the other way around. It used to be, you know, arms, back, and glutes was, arms and glutes and, you know, legs in general would just take longer. But now I'm feeling my hamstrings. I can feel the back of them. I can feel, oh yeah, all the heads of the hamstrings here. I've got a slight bit of definition through them. I've not got piano chords yet, but I'll get them in probably about a month or two. That'd be quite a cool sight to see again, because I often don't see lines in the back of my legs, but when I do, it means I'm in relatively good shape. So I can finally get down from 15% body fat, which is apparently significantly over fat, or not worthy of putting on YouTube, apparently.
And Jonathan is playfully poking fun at some of the trolls that he's had recently that have basically just called him fat, when it's pretty much the furthest thing from the truth.
Yeah, it is bizarre. Honestly, it is very bizarre. I do get a bit of a laugh out of it sometimes, but yeah. Anyway, we could probably get some questions now. So if you do have any questions, guys, please leave a Q in the chat. Whilst we're waiting for questions to come through, I'm just going to go through the chat and see who's said hello. Now, Rick's actually been very early today, and I think also last week is about an hour plus early. So great job on that. I appreciate you hopping on roughly 1 hour, 30 minutes prior to the start time. You've had all that time but asked no questions, which means you're just here for entertainment purposes, I think. And speaking of here as well, thank you for joining. And please do hit the like button if you have not yet already. Once a weak man has joined, I actually spoke to him on a call the other day. Really nice gentleman. Lost a tremendous amount of body fat, looks significantly better than what he did, I imagine, when he's overweight. Carnivore diet, right amount of exercise, nothing too drastic, and he's achieved a lot in the year or two he's been on it. So definitely recommend listening out for his questions, I think, because I think he's got some good insights. And also, he's from the UK, I believe, somewhere near me somewhere, I think, but I could be wrong. His accent sounds quite neutral, so... we can answer someone else's question. So, Jerome, are duck eggs better than hen eggs?
Ooh, I've never had duck eggs, and I've never looked much at the nutrition, but I assume that ducks in general probably eat closer to a species-appropriate diet than at least the chickens in this country. So I would lean yes, but I would probably defer to Jonathan on that one.
I'd say yeah. I'd say yes, because I think the fat concentration is a bit higher. The nutrition profile in, I believe it's the B vitamins, is better gram for gram. Not substantially, but a little bit better. So if you're trying to absolutely optimize and you've got a bit more money to spend, then I'll definitely look at getting some duck eggs. I'd say the quality of the feed that they have is probably also a bit better, but it depends where you come from. But I'd defer to the duck specialist, which is Rick. I love my duck eggs, but I do not have many free-range chicken eggs to compare them to. Yeah. He did say ducks are tasty, though, so that's good to know. Yeah. Do you have duck much out of interest? Was that not much of a thing, or where you are?
It's kind of hard to find out here outside of Chinese restaurants. So I'll usually around Thanksgiving I'll get half of a duck, but seldom have it outside of that.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I think for us it's a bit like lamb. Like we have good access to duck and lamb. We just don't tend to have it much. I think it's more the Western world. We associate, like, we go to McDonald's, for example. The average person will go to McDonald's. You got beef burgers and you got KFC fried chicken. That's it. You don't get fried lamb. You don't get fried duck unless it's a heart attack duck, or heart attack chicken maybe, or lamb, maybe. But it's interesting to see the way the fast food determines what we generally eat as a animal source. But yeah, for sure, duck is nice and tasty. I had beef and lamb on yesterday, which was really nice. And also, apologies, guys, I was late to the stream today. I had to reinstall the software that puts out my video twice, reset all the settings. I had an issue where I would talk, but there would be a massive latency issue. So I was speaking it as miles behind my actual voice, so it was a nightmare. But I've got it up and running now, so I'm actually just using my laptop webcam and the same microphone I always use. But it's annoying because I have my lighting set up perfect, like absolutely optimized. And I was like, let's go, press go. Then I came on with Jerome in the studio just before, and I was like, oh, Jerome, you can't see me. Oh, let me press this button. Oh, it's not there. So standard. But I'll make it through. I'll figure it out. Probably just spend a few 100 hours sorting out like usual. Nice. Nice to see you, Matthew. Thank you for joining. Fractal Beans as well. Thank you for joining. And Alicia's here, the Baroness of Beef. Good morning. Sitting here with half a kilo of beef patties and scrambled eggs with butter. Not bad. Out of curiosity, how many times a day do you eat? Because I know you eat a lot, Alicia. I'm quite curious about that. Have you seen in your experience that people generally react negative to dairy? I'd honestly say no, but I've got a slightly different cohort of clients than most people. Given that I'm quite focused on body composition, people would come to me mostly for that. So in most cases, they're relatively healthy already. They just want to optimize what they're already doing in the gym. Same with diet. Then saying that, online, anecdotally, on different forums, on videos, I have heard a lot of people have issues with dairy. There is a very strong genetic component to it. Is it a carnivore food? Yeah. Is it an animal food? Yeah. Is it going to kill you? Maybe not, unless you're severely allergic. I think there's pros and cons to it, and you kind of assess it in a case-by-case situation. But I do otherwise have dairy, and I have got in contest shape having loads of dairy, upwards of probably 75 grams of carbs a day through dairy when I last competed. But saying that I think a lot of the issue with the insulin from the extra carbohydrate was mitigated by the activity levels that I was doing. So for the average person, they won't be able to achieve that, contest lean with lots of dairy in a diet. What about you, Jerome? I know you're a bit like me. You have quite a mixed sort of diet, but you're mixed diet, but quite basic, like put it in the air fryer, salt, eat it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't think dairy is inflammatory for a lot of people that I talk to, but the biggest issue I see is it's just really, really easy to overeat. Something like 1 cubed inch of cheese is like 110 so-called food calories. So if you're trying to keep your food within reasonable proportions, it's very easy to sit down and eat a lot of cheese. And maybe some of that is me living in Wisconsin, where inundated with cheese everywhere. We have vans out at gas stations that sell fresh cheese curds every day. It's everywhere around here. So I think it's generally best as a garnish, or if someone's looking to improve their body composition, maybe abstain at all from cheese.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Yeah, I think the main thing people say about dairy is inflammatory, makes you gain fat. They're the two things people usually talk about when they talk about a negative light. All I will say is if you want to lose fat and that is your goal, make sure you have your macros dialed in. Having, for example, a cup of milk is not going to absolutely destroy your fat loss progress. Having a cup of butter, if you could do that, will destroy your fat loss process. So, you know, we have a hierarchy in terms of what we look at and what we remove. If our macros are on point, but we don't want to lower fat anymore, okay, then we can start looking at dairy, the potential insulin raise from that, the potential fat storage from that. That would occur because of it. So, yeah, a good question. I think they're talking to me, which is I can't see your Instagram. It should be Carnivore Muscle, I think.
Maybe you've been shadow banned again.
Do you think? Yeah, there is actually a way on YouTube to work out if that's happened or not. I worked out because you can see if your videos are recommended and where from. So for one video recently, I shared it on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook, by the way, anymore, guys. I might be, but I'm actually not on it, if you know what I mean. So basically, I posted on there. More people viewed it from Facebook than viewed it from YouTube suggestions. Bear in mind, YouTube suggestions is a video. Facebook isn't a video platform, so it doesn't make sense. That kind of tells me, okay, maybe the topic wasn't quite, you know. But it does seem bizarre. I honestly don't think channels like my sort of size get targeted, really. I just think sometimes you could say something in a video. Maybe there's an algorithm, a little button someone accidentally pressed. I don't know. But maybe a bit paranoid, maybe. Sophie's joined. Thanks for joining. She's probably currently on a treadmill or washing up. Good morning, Bob. Nice to see you. Or good evening or good morning. Oh, where's Nebraska in the States?
A little bit southwest of me. So
okay, so he's a bit further.
It's like right in the middle of the country.
Oh, okay, fair enough. We've got our first question tonight, guys. So Matthew asked, in your opinions, what is the most effective set extender after reaching concentric failure? This is a Jerome question, I think. We've covered this a long time ago, and we had slightly differing opinions, but I think it's more just our experience and what we prefer, really. I think that's most of it. What would you say about intensifiers or set extenders?
Yeah, in general, anything that's going to raise the intensity of your set is probably going to be a good thing. As far as which one is ideal, I would say it probably has more to do with whether or not you have a training partner there and what equipment you're using. Depending on if it's a free weight movement, rest pause is probably going to be a little easier to do. If you're on a machine, doing a drop set could be really easy because you could just slide that pin up, one or two plates, whatever it is for the movement. I wouldn't necessarily try and strain the gnat and swallow the camel, trying to figure out which one is going to be best. Think of it in terms of intensity. Which one of these set extenders or set intensifiers can I perform that's going to raise the intensity of my set without compromising safety? My personal preference is static holds, or if I have a training partner, forced repetitions. But if I'm training by myself, drop sets or rest pause.
Yeah, for sure. That makes good sense. I personally like rest pause, cluster sets. I do sometimes do drop sets, but that's usually movements where I can easily drop it from the stack. So, for example, with my back, I'm not going to be doing a plate-loaded chest press, standing up, walk around machine, picking up heavy plate, putting it on the back, on the side, going to the side, putting it. It's pointless wear and tear on my body that I just don't need. Then again, if it's a pin-loaded stack, so pin-loaded chest press, just go like that next to you. And yeah, I'll probably do a drop set on that sometimes. I do use both. I just tend to prefer rest pause. Just because I feel like when you're sat there, you do say a minute and a half of whatever, you rest 5-10 seconds. You're sat there thinking about the next 5-10 seconds, but you're not got to do anything in that 5-10 seconds. So for me, my concentration is a bit better. But then other people like Jerome, he works out in his studio sort of thing. He's got his own equipment to do. He doesn't have distractions, doesn't have music he doesn't want, doesn't have people brushing past his leg, messing around with his equipment while he's using it. So for him, it's a bit more efficacious, I think.
Yeah.
But they both work. What allows you to work safe and also work hard and also let you enjoy it.
And depending on the equipment, especially if you're using something plate loaded, if you have to get off of your machine, take 1 or 2 plates off of each side, you're basically just doing rest pause anyways instead of a drop set. So at that point, you might as well just sit with the same weight for 5 to 10 seconds, keep your composure, keep your body alignment proper, and then just hit that next repetition or 2 as hard as you can.
Yeah, good makes good sense. So the next question is from the Baroness of Beef. Is what does your meal frequency look like on prep, lads? Jerome, what's your meal frequency like? Because you do the opposite thing I do, which kind of shows people that there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah, at least at this moment, I'm in like the low 230s right now, so it's somewhat instinctual at this point, and then I'll tighten up the closer things get. So I had salmon for breakfast this morning. I may or may not eat again. At this point, I'm keeping things pretty loose, and then I can always kind of tighten up the closer you get. But the thing is, like when you've competed or have done as many preps as Jonathan and I have done, you become really acutely aware of how your body responds to different things, and you know what to expect with a certain degree of consistency. So if Jonathan or I were to coach somebody, we probably wouldn't have that much of a laissez-faire approach into structuring a diet for somebody. It'd be very strict. We're trying to give, the optimal diet plan that somebody can stick to, because for a lot of people, getting ready for a show is going to be a whole novel experience, and you have to have a certain degree of consistency to see how your body responds. As where Jonathan and I, like you said, you're giving yourself a bit of a macronutrient range, and then as that show gets closer, you'll be able to dial it in more and more precise. But at least at the moment, for me, I'm eating when I'm hungry. At least at the moment, I'm focusing more on macronutrient ratios, trying to have a little bit higher of a protein to fat ratio, and I'll increase the fat as the contest gets closer. But still having a little bit of fat on my body, I can afford, at least right now, to not be super strict with things. What about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same mind, really. Like I said, like the range of macros, I'm trying to hit between, I don't know, 260 and 300 protein a day. It's quite loose, but to be honest, if I eat 40 grams of protein, I don't get fat from it. I don't seem to feel bad from it. Just the appetite, as you've kind of said before in the past, like your appetite goes up and down a little bit throughout the week. The other thing as well is I tend to eat 3 or 4 meals at the moment, but I'm having more 4 at the moment now. I've been cutting. I have a lot of dairy, so I do get a good amount of insulin pumped from my body through the ingestion of exogenous carbohydrates. So yeah, it's quite a bizarre one. So I'm not too concerned about having a significant spike in insulin. The last time I competed, my lowest macros I believe were 550 protein and 150 fat, with an activity level of 3.5 hours every day. I won't be able to sustain that now. So my diet going into this and my endpoint will be substantially different to what it was last time. So I'm going to be using diet as more of a lever than exercise and activity this time. And it'd be interesting to just compare and contrast what I felt worked better. Obviously, like Jerome, I take notes of everything I do. I've got a whole library in my head of everything I've done and what has achieved what and what was bad, what was good in different ways. So I'll be updating this channel with that sort of thing in the near future. And as Alicia has come onto the channel and just asked a question, I will just say that I interviewed one of my coaching clients. I think it was yesterday, actually. My mind's behind. But we actually spoke about her carnivore bodybuilding contest preparation. So it'll be a really good interview for you guys to listen into. Honestly, she's very inspiring for autoimmune diseases, other health problems as well, and she's in really good shape. We're actually meeting up with her again in a couple of weeks, and we're going to go through some posing sort of stuff and maybe a little bit of training as well. But yeah, lots to look forward to on this channel. It's going to be very contest prep, fat loss based, I think, for the most part. I think when it comes to building muscle, you know what you have to do. Watch my videos which talk about building muscle. You can't reinvent the wheel. Eat to appetite. Try to eat a bit more sometimes if you can. track your measurements, your metrics, your training performance, take measurements, adjust as time goes on. If you get absolutely stuck, book a consultation with me or Jerome. We'll be best able to help you from there. Very situational. So we've got a lot of useful content coming out for people that subscribe to my channel for that particular reason. And this gentleman is from London, just so you guys know. Not wherever I said I was from, because I remember he is quite near to me on the map, but for us, when we say, oh, I'm an hour away, 2 hours, it's actually quite far. It takes us forever to get there. So for you guys in the States that might be listening to this or watching this, you have a different perspective on distances. You're like, oh, it's just the next state along. For us, that's like forever. That take like days. Traffic here is horrendous. Lots of bad drivers. And definitely subscribe and do stuff on our channels. Jeremy, do you have any interesting content coming up, by the way?
I'm still, well, I have an interview. I was interviewed by Aryan Meyer, kind of an OG high intensity training channel that should be coming out hopefully within the next week or so. I'm still working on a presentation on why I think isometric exercises are better for strength and hypertrophy than dynamic exercise, which is with movement. But that's getting way into the weeds of like physiology and sliding filament theory and all of that boring stuff that nobody cares about. So yeah, I got a couple things coming up, but nothing too terribly exciting, just nerdy stuff.
I'll definitely be the first one to probably watch that, like it, and comment on it. I'll probably download it as well. Apparently, YouTube favors videos that you download, guys. If you did want to support my channel even further, download it, put it onto your YouTube watch list or playlist, put it on repeat a few thousand times, and I'll be very grateful. I think it only counts one view as one, but from my understanding, one view takes a minute to register, so you can't pop on a video then pop off. It takes a minute for it to actually recognize, okay, this person's actually watched this. On the flip side, if you only watch it for a minute, the audience retention rate will go down, in which case they'll say, oh, this video is really bad because they've only watched 1% of it. So if you're going to watch it properly. Have you had roast goose, Jerome? I've not had that.
I have not.
It sounds quite interesting. This guy's lean year round. I used to be lean year round when I was athletic. Less as much now. I think age has catched up. What about you, Jeremy? Do you try to stay quite lean, or you just hover around wherever you feel good?
No, most of the year, my body naturally wants to be like 15 to 20% body fat. Maybe that's just my ancestry. But with the contest coming up with summer in a few months, looking forward to being in decent shape.
That's cool. What's your opinion on targeted carnivore keto? Do pre-workout carbs support gym performance and muscle growth? Jerome, what's your opinion on this one? Because I'm probably just going to defer to other videos I've made.
Yeah, I think if someone hasn't been keto carnivore for a long time, there's some validity to that approach. Jonathan and I know animal-based bodybuilding and fitness coaches that use this approach. I kind of default to some of the research by Steve Finney and Jeff Volek looking at endurance cyclists who showed that fat adapted athletes who haven't had carbohydrate in something like 12 to 18 months replenish glycogen every bit as fast and to the same degree as carbohydrate fueled athletes when consuming a post-workout shake. So to me, I think when someone's truly fat adapted, which takes some time, I don't think there's any advantage to having carbohydrates kind of bracketed around your workout. Now, if you're newer to the keto carnivore lifestyle, then, if you feel like it gives you a little bit more jam in the gym, go for it. Have 20 to 50 grams of carbs, but long-term, I think it's unnecessary and in some cases undesirable.
Yeah, I kind of stand on the same viewpoint, really. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to very briefly share the screen. You know what I'm going to do, don't you?
No.
If I press the right button. Look at. Okay, so this is the ebook that we wrote. So we basically defined everything to do with carbohydrate intake in the ebook. So the biological processes in explicit detail, which I think most people don't need to know, but they would ask anyway. Role of enzymes and ingested demands. We also talk about, if I can find it, with a few examples of gluconeogenesis and how it works in the body somewhere. Yeah, it's a whole section of our books dedicated to it because we realized this would come up quite a lot in conversation. I kind of stand with Jerome, like, yeah, ultimately, your body will thrive with whatever you give it. It'll find a way to do it. It's just there's a good, better, and best case scenario. And Jerome always sort of says and recommends, upgrade your standards. If you're going to do it properly. You don't know what health benefit you might get if you drop that extra 30 grams of rice cakes or fruit or honey, what have you. I don't believe that these things are absolutely going to damage people, but I kind of feel like you're missing out on something because, I added some of these things in a couple of times in the past, actually, and I did a whole meat, fruit, honey video experiment. So I equated the dreaded calories, and protein intake was kept the same, but carbohydrate went up and replaced some of the fat intake. My training performance in that short-term intervention that I did was much worse. I'd say generally across the board, my stats were about 10 to 15% down in the gym. Gut microbiome shifts, granted, yeah, that probably comes into play a lot. But 15%, I've been sick sometimes, or I've had diarrhea, upset stomach. I've not lost 15%, training performance in the gym from that. So it tells me maybe there isn't something to this. Maybe it doesn't optimize something. Now, saying that, there is one indication where someone would benefit from carbohydrates in their diet, perhaps actually two, maybe. The first one is if someone has a underactive thyroid and they're also unmedicated. So there's one study on that, which is in a book that I wrote, a video I made, 6 reasons why you shouldn't do carnivore, or why you won't succeed in the carnivore, or something like that. I talk about that and outline the study. I'll link it in the show notes. That's one of 2 reasons why someone might find a benefit absolutely from including carbohydrates. So it comes down to a faulty gluconeogenic pathway where the output is reduced by up to around 45%. Now, saying that, we're mostly fat burners. We're not going to be oxidizing purely sugar in the gym, especially if you're doing an animal sort of carnivore keto diet, what have you. So personally, I wouldn't be looking at it. The other reason might be if you're a female, which you're not. Perhaps you see a benefit from increasing carbohydrates, therefore reducing cortisol, therefore increasing leptin. Maybe that benefits some people, especially women. There's some anecdotes around it, but it's not absolutely conclusive yet. But they're the 2 conclusive reasons why someone may or may not have carbohydrates based on their current status. But it takes time. Do look at the research that is around. Definitely look at what Jerome pointed out, the Stephen Finney and Volek studies. They did something called, I think it's called like the FASTER study, something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
Check those out. And these people are much more advanced than most people. These are, they're testing what people do in terms of long distance endurance performance. So if anyone needed carbohydrates and found a benefit from it, it would be them, because they're the people, running on a treadmill for hours, doing, long distance spinning on a bike or something. Someone going to the gym doing a 45 minutes session, which might entail actually 5 minutes of actual activity in the gym, will not need carbohydrates to bolster their training performance, I don't think. But I don't know what I'm talking about, and I'm definitely a zealot, so there we go. So Alicia eats twice, but sometimes 3 times. If I need the hormone support, I might lie myself. Yeah, it makes sense. I do have one lady at the moment. She's still getting results, and she's had to increase her food intake because she's just ravenous. And I'm like, well, something's obviously off with your body or different with your body at this period of time. So do something about it. I obviously trust this person and not just binge eating for the sake of it on carnivore foods and milk and cheese and stuff. It seems that they are actually generally hungry. So I increased the meat intake in their diet and just said, maybe you can't hit this exact diet right now. have a boiled egg if you're a bit hungrier, increase your meat intake by, say, 4 ounces or something, see how you go from there, then check in again a few days down the line if that's not fixed the issue. But do you hear much about this, like, manipulating your diet, or as a female to sort of support the hormonal cycle?
I haven't worked with many females in terms of diets to the point where, especially considering women's cycles, I would probably just defer them to a female coach. Nothing against women, but I just feel a little out of my realm of expertise if I were to try and structure a diet for a woman.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's a bit tricky with women, but I think it's better in a way because you learn more about clients, especially working with women. They tend to reveal more about themselves. You get to know them on a more personal kind of level.
Yeah.
Um, with their check-ins, I do tend to notice they're a lot more full with information. I always say to people, look, put as much information as you want. I don't care if it's 20 pages. I'll read all of it. And the better picture I have, the better I can best assess where you're currently at and what you need to do to get to where you want to be. So certainly is quite interesting. Where are we? I'm going to press some more buttons. Pigeon. So have you eaten pigeon before? I had it at a restaurant a few years ago and thought it was tough, bland, and nothing to chat about. I must admit, it is quite tough. In my experience, it tastes a bit like, I want to say duck, maybe, but just not quite as tasty. I did, however, have pheasant and rabbit, which I did really enjoy. Out of the three, pigeon was my least favorite, but I thought it's still good. Like, I wouldn't not have it. Have you had anything like that, Jerome? Anything a bit
No,
obscure?
I'm not too adventurous with food that I eat. I'm also really cheap, so it's a lot of beef mince, eggs, and eventually I'll get a little bit more bold and start buying entire strip loins of steak and cutting them up. But to me, simple is best.
Yeah, actually, this is like not really confidential, but it's not news that I'm really telling explicitly. So don't ask any questions, basically. But I had a newspaper journalist speak to me recently, and I had a photographer in the house just today actually, and we spent about 2 hours taking photos of me. I'm basically trying to promote the carnivore diet, so I might be in a featured article at some point in the near future, which is quite cool. And obviously the photos was, yeah, I was like, oh, how much meat do you want me to bring out for these pictures? Like, want me to hold a box of eggs or something, and just to get everything out that you got. I was like, okay, so I got everything out that I had, and obviously we're talking about like 30-40 kilos of food that I just had in the fridge and freezer in the kitchen. We did different poses, like putting the milk between there and holding like 10 sticks of butter or whatever it was, so that sort of thing. So it's quite funny. And if it does come to fruition, I'll definitely update you guys and post a picture of it. And yeah, that was one of my goals this year. One of my objectives was to do something in a article, public, something quite mainstream slightly. The other thing was to speak at a convention, exhibition, conference, seminar sort of thing publicly in front of a couple of hundred people. So the second of those goals I have would have been met in March, but unfortunately I can't make it to that event. So I'm going to be probably doing the next one whenever that comes around. So that will be with the guys at Carnivore Team GB. So Phil Escott, Ben Hunt, and the others, and we're going to be doing talks in the UK about the carnivore diet, mostly up north in the country, quite far for me to get to, but looking at nearer venues. So that's what's coming up in the future anyway. Probably find some more questions now. Got one from Bob about walking. Oh, Jerome, this is right up your street. So I've been walking daily. The last few days I've been pushing and I've been a little sore the next day. Am I approaching the point where I need to walk every other day for rest recovery? I'm going to ask the walking expert.
Yeah. Well, I think walking every day is a good idea. In terms of soreness and recovery, I assume you're doing some degree of strength training. And if that's the case, the only real numbers I would be concerned about would be your output in the gym. If you're making the valid application of any theory of reality, your progress should be essentially uninterrupted until the natural conclusion has been met. To make that a little bit more concise, you should be getting stronger pretty much every single time that you're in the gym. If you're sore, I generally lean on the side of taking an extra day of recovery, but soreness in and of itself is not necessarily an arbiter of either a good workout or necessarily how recovered you are. Um, Last I've seen, there's maybe about a dozen or so suggested mechanisms underpinning delayed onset muscle soreness, and nobody really knows exactly what it is. So I would look at kind of a measure of, or sorry, a mix of subjective and objective markers in terms of gauging recovery. How's your energy? How's your sleep? How's your appetite? How are your numbers in the gym? How do you just generally feel? Um, but in terms of just general movements, I'm a big fan of people being generally active, walking, spending time outside, playing with their kids, spending time with your partner, whatever it is. So I wouldn't necessarily take walking to every other day.
Yeah, for sure. I don't really have anything to add to that. I don't think. I'll just say if it's something you do part of your day and you enjoy it, do it. Carry on doing it. If it gets to the point where that pain, if it's knee pain, joint pain, you're feeling it's exhausting. Like if you dread doing something when it comes to activity, don't do it. Now I'm sure Bob. I know Bob does plenty of walking already. He's not going to be deprived of walking just by not doing any for a few days. Personally, I'd give it a rest for a few days at least until things feel a bit better. It won't absolutely destroy your outcomes. Your appetite will probably follow with the decreased energy output. So, yeah, good question. I've recently started adding double cream to my yogurt. Is this a slippery slope? I'd say no, really. Probably not for most people, just because there's not many things you can have it with to make it taste nice. Now, when people talk about double cream, it's a bit like heavy cream over there. It's just thicker, basically. What we'll say is, if you start having honey with the cream, if you start having coffee with the double cream, if you start having, fruit, chocolate, berries, that's the difficult point, which I'll be like thinking twice about. So I certainly wouldn't be adding in extra food beyond that point, which makes it hyperpalatable, and then therefore it's not really carnivore. So personally, I add it in if I need more food, if I'm hungry. If you're eating a low fat Greek yogurt somewhere in a restaurant, you're out and about. Perhaps you have a buffet spread. Yeah, add some cream to it to increase the fat content. Otherwise, you're just getting protein and carbs, which is going to make you really hungry later on. Protein and carbs tend to, how do I put it, cross inhibit their uptake, meaning that insulin will raise exponentially higher as opposed to what that insulin increase would be from protein or carbs as a single ingredient. So it comes down to like macronutrient. How do you put it? Two macronutrients at once, insulin, too much in the body at once, basically. So body's trying to produce more insulin to get out of the system, to get it flushed into the cells and what have you. But Jerome, do you indulge in double cream, or do you just have it when you want?
On rare occasion, to me, it gives me a little bit more energy if I put a little bit of cream in my coffee. I don't think it's necessarily a slippery slope. Um, this will kind of tie into Andre has a question coming up soon that this might be a little bit related to. I know someone that when she indulges in large amounts of heavy cream or double cream, it seems like her weight drops. And Jason Fung, nephrologist up in, I think, Vancouver, has suggested that, or at least has pointed out some studies where a lot of people's metabolism tends to track based on how much they're eating. When they eat more, their metabolism increases. When they eat less, their metabolism slows down. So I don't think it's necessarily a slippery slope. For some people, it may be, but a lot of that's going to come down to just cravings, portion control, more so than the actual physiology of the digestion of the food itself.
Yeah, I think so. Sometimes these things can be beneficial, like you said. I mean, when I did my high fat experiment like over a year ago now, something like 360, 380 grams of fat and below 200 grams of protein, I believe. I was never hungry, but that made me realize, okay, at that point, sometimes I was like, oh, I really fancy something to eat. purely out of boredom. It wasn't because I was actually hungry. I never felt my stomach like growl, you know. So it could be useful adjunct to your diet if you enjoy it. We had a good conversation about dairy the other day, and I think it is overstated. I think if you're white, if you're active, probably not a problem, but it can be a problem if you approach it the wrong way. You start coupling it with other things which aren't animal foods. Yes. Pigeon breast fried in butter is great. The rest of the bird makes good dog food. Probably. Yeah, I want to get George eating some of this stuff some days, but I don't really get whole animals. We can get all sorts at the local market near me, you know, the farmer's store. They do loads of things now. They even do like lamb chops and different sorts of bacon. They do some sausages and burgers there, but they're just not. They're like 75% beef. I'm like, what's the rest of it? Like, what am I going to ingest by having this? But they do look quite tasty. You know, I know you like sausages and things, but I mean, do you get all your stuff from like Costco, Walmart, or do you go elsewhere sometimes?
It depends. I try to go to farmers markets when I can. There's an elk farm that raises 100% grass-fed elk, maybe 10 minutes from where I live. I try to buy from them when I can, but it's expensive. Most of the time I go to Walmart, Costco, and then when I have a little bit of extra discretionary income, then I'll try and buy local meat.
Yeah, for me, the local meat's probably 10-15% more expensive. So I don't mind paying that personally. I will say eggs are quite expensive and raw milk is quite expensive for what it is. But I'm probably spending now about it's about 9 to 10 British pounds a day, which is about $1. Sorry, $10. No, $12 roughly, per day on food. That's quite a lot of food for that money. So yeah, it doesn't work out too bad. But as soon as you start adding like more different things, you know, extra condiments, perhaps you want to buy expensive salt. Yeah, it can be a bit of a cost sometimes. But I actually was going to ask, what salt do you use?
Usually kosher salt, just
Mm.
right off the grocery store shelf, kosher salt, because I like the big flakes for pinching. I do have some Redmond's smoked chef's blend salt for when I feel like getting a little bit fancy, but I don't obsess over salt. What about you?
I do a little bit. I don't mind spending a bit of money, but that's just because I don't get through much of it at all.
Sure.
I think Sophie and I got through last year. I'd say about maybe just over a kilo of salt in a year. That's not, you know, between four of us, you know, two midgets and two adults, not a whole lot. But recently I've been using Celtic sea salt. I think it's called Sel de Garond over here, something like that. So it is like a grey sort of looking salt, but it does taste really good. I'll be cautious of the Himalayan salt. Most of it isn't from the Himalayas, ironically. Apparently they use explosives to get it out, which kind of probably isn't a good thing. I don't know. But you know, you hear this, but how it translates to health outcomes, I don't know. There's probably not really a solid way to tell except from, you know, mineral testing, toxin, contaminant testing, in which case most of them just do it themselves. Not many of them do third-party testing from what I've heard. So I don't know. But I think it could be a big deal in the future. I think it could be another potential like addition to really look into. A question from Andrew, which kind of relates to what the thing was earlier. So, in the context of body recomposition, can undereating prevent or slow fat loss? How would you know someone is undereating when trying to lose fat and build muscle on a strict carnivore diet? Thanks. Jeremy, I need to break down the question. What do you think they're
Sure.
asking?
I think chronic long-term undereating, like people that diet 6 months for a bodybuilding show and are in long-term food restriction, I think will absolutely slow your metabolism. I tend to think that the body is fairly adaptive, and over a certain time span that's going to be dependent on the individual, will kind of accommodate to how much you're eating. If you eat more, you'll put on a little bit of fat, but you're going to burn a little bit more energy every single day. If you eat less, you're gonna burn a little bit less. So if you're in a constant state of a significant food deficit for months at a time, I think it absolutely will slow fat loss. Um, One of my old bodybuilding mentors, in talking about contest prep, used to say that you want to eat as much food as you can to where you're still losing fat. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Um, as far as how would you know if, well, the best way would be, are you accurately tracking your food intake? Um, and depending on whether you're counting calories or macros or portions or grams of carbohydrate or whatever way you're using to somewhat objectively track food intake, we all kind of have an idea of what feels like it's not a lot of food. If it's calories, I would say if it's 1,600 calories or less, it's probably way too little for a guy. If it's macros, then yeah, if you're under like 150 protein, 150 fat, I would say that's running pretty low. If your diet seems like it's really low and you're not losing fat, then I think the best course of action is probably a couple of weeks of reverse dieting or a little bit of refeeding and then slowly taper the food intake down again. But in general, if you're not seeing fat loss, you're not seeing any change on the scale, and if you're not seeing any improvements in the gym, these are all measures that you're probably not moving in the direction that you want to be moving in.
For sure, yeah. The only thing I think I'd add was be your body temperature.
Mm.
Perhaps when you wake up, if you feel very cool, like you start to feel a bit colder, a bit more edgy, anxious, maybe a bit more insular. You maybe not as sociable. Um, Perhaps you feel calm and collected in the day, but at night you can't sleep. It could be that your leptin's just too low. You need leptin and other hormones like that to sort of start up and how to put it, rev up the circadian rhythm. So, for example, if you're underfed, your body's going to think, well, I'm not going to waste energy here by keeping my heart rate elevated and keep energetic, keep active, lots of steps. Your body's going to find a way to slow you down, but it'll also keep your mind active because you need your mind to find the next kill, to find the next animal you're going to eat. So you might feel like wired but tired as well. But the main things outside of what Jerome said, which I absolutely agree with, would be the sleep side of it, and the temperature side, your activity output. The leaner you are, the more of a problem that you'll notice. So, for example, if you're going from 20% body fat to 19, that'll feel a lot less detrimental to your body and health outcomes and metabolism, as opposed to going from 5% to 4%. It's extremely disproportionate. Personally, knowing what I know about you from different conversations, I'd say it's probably not something to worry about yet, but I would look at it a bit more when you're about 12% body fat. I think sometimes people try to pull too many levers at once. And the other thing is they don't stick to a plan. So have your goal in sight and think, okay, for this amount of fat loss, whatever your goal is, I've achieved this using this intervention. Did it seem worth it to you? Did, feeling really hungry a week make it seem really absolutely worth it for you to continue that way of eating to the point where it's going to get harder and harder and harder? It might be that you're quite comfortable with your current body fat and that's it. So always have an end point. So for me, compete, for Jerome as well, compete nearly the same day, which is quite funny. After that, eat more food, feel good, go right back up to 12, 15% body fat and feel quite comfortable there. But you have to look at, I'm doing this for this period of time. Will this way of eating, this life, this amount of food intake keep me happy, keep me on track, or will it just piss me off, basically? Yeah. Is there anything to add to that?
Not without really getting into the weeds with, I think, how you and I tend to do contest preps. I mean, really, I mentioned this before, the biggest difference between what you and I do and what the average person does on a carnivore diet is you and I are just more precise and more consistent. And that's really the difference between someone who just wants to lose a little bit of weight and someone who wants to get as lean as they want to get. Just comes down to being very meticulous and doing something for a long enough period of time. There's nothing magical about getting down to 4, 5, 6% body fat. It's just being very, very strict for a long enough period of time.
Yeah, and some people will experience some, I wouldn't say nutrient deficiencies, but inklings, intentions, instincts to have a bit more or something. This
Mhm.
last week, I've really craved meat. Like I've added like probably an extra half pound of meat to my day in the last week. Also, I've decreased fat and protein from other sources, which is annoying because I like whey protein shakes. But yeah, just it's quite telling, isn't it? It might be that you need to increase your meat, decrease your eggs. Looking at your comment earlier, maybe you need to include some dairy. Maybe that's where the palpitations come from. I said countless times on my channel, there are people out there that do require a high amount of calcium than other people. I'm one of them. I couldn't do beef and eggs diet for very long without feeling a bit angsty. So,
Mm.
yeah, excellent. We'll get to the next question then. Um, I enjoy doing pull ups. How fast do you recommend doing them? Good question. Um, Slow enough that you feel every inch of the movement, and that if you had to pause the movement because a bomb went off in the next room or building, what have you, that you could stop and observe it safely. Um, that's probably how I'd say doing it. But if you want a precise time, I generally say 3 to 6 seconds. Six would be better than three, but I know most people like to do things a bit faster. Um, Personally, with a movement like pull ups, it's tricky to get right, tricky to activate the muscles precisely because you're articulating your body around the bar. Whereas with a pull down, you can articulate the bar around your body. So that may impact your ability to contract the muscle fibers in your lats, for example. Um, so yeah, I'd personally do it a bit slower, but that's just me. Maybe just say 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down, maybe with a 2 3 second pause at the top, something like that. What about you, Jeremy? What do you focus on with the pull-ups?
Yeah, if your goal is to do as many pull-ups as you can, I would perform them relatively quickly. If your goal is to develop your back, shoulders, and arms, generally I tell people to move as slow as possible to where it's a continual movement and not a series of starts and stops. So 3 to 6 seconds is a pretty good guideline. Um, Slight pause at the bottom, really just control the tempo, especially around the changes of direction. Um, you don't want to have any massive peak forces in the positions where your joints are most susceptible to injury. So the actual speed that you're moving about halfway through the range of movement doesn't really matter that much, as long as you generally have very slow, controlled changes of direction. 3 to 6 seconds is good. Um, I don't think I would necessarily go much faster than that, but um, if you like doing pull-ups, and I like doing pull-ups too, um, yeah, it's a very challenging exercise. So best of luck, and if you do really slow them down, let me know how that goes.
Yeah, and be aware as well, guys. When we talk about like, more time and attention, we talk about muscular hypertrophy. We're talking about making that muscle work. So ignore, oh, I did only 4 reps. Great. You did 4 reps that took each of them took 10 seconds, for example. That's about double what the average gym bro is doing, but you've done a third the amount of reps. But you've done more work. It's been harder for your body because you're intentionally moving the weight, the resistance, the load, what have you, um, in a very precise manner. And as well, just touching on the point you made about not deliberate stop starts in either sort of direction. What I say to some people is like, imagine you've got an acorn or a pea or something between the stack or the
Mm-hmm.
floor and the ground. Imagine you're trying to just about touch it, but not break it.
Mm-hmm.
So you just sort of go, it's not, you know. So I think that's a key point as well. I do see a lot of people make that mistake.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty cool. I like that
There's
question.
a it's sad within the health and fitness literature. There's not a widely agreed upon definition of volume. For the most part, people tend to think of it as sets times reps times weight, which is really mechanical work. But anybody who spent any time in the gym would know that it's a lot harder to deadlift 500 pounds one time than it is to deadlift 100 pounds 5 times when that's the same amount of mechanical work. Volume is really effort over time, um, which is unfortunate because that's a very subjective way to define volume. So you got to kind of strike this sweet spot of time under tension, using a moderate weight that still drives intensity. So yeah, Jonathan's 100% right. If you do 40 seconds time under tension, well, a normal set for most individuals is like 15 to 20 seconds. So your one set was 2 to 3 of somebody else's set. So don't get too hung up in the numbers. Just train as intensely as safely possible.
Absolutely, for sure. Yeah, I agree with that completely. Nothing to add, I don't think. Spiritual hypertrophy has asked, it seems that for deep ketosis we need below 20% protein and zero carbs. Of course, wouldn't the best fat loss and muscle retention theoretically be in the deepest ketosis alongside supplementing electrolytes? This is a good question, and I thought about this in extensive details. I'm sure Jerome probably has. So Jerome and I have both actually tried, different ratios, proportions of fat and protein. We tend to align our thoughts probably quite similarly. All I will say really is fat is much more likely to make you fat than protein. The reason I say that is because, I did the experiment myself. I did 550 grams of protein over the span of about 9 months straight, and I didn't get fat from it. And if I did that same thing with fat, well, I actually did that same thing, but alluding to the point made earlier, so I did 180, 200 protein with 360, 380 fat, something like that. I did gain fat doing that. So, I don't know what the calories were for what it's worth. I don't know. Don't have a clue. But that's quite telling for me. Now, one of the issues I think we have with the deep ketosis, which I'm pretty sure they're kind of inferring in the last part of the question, which is about the electrolytes. So if our meat consumption, protein consumption is low, our potassium, magnesium, other mineral consumption will be less as well. Then again, we know in a low insulin state where protein is particularly low, perhaps, and fats particularly high, maybe, we spare more electrolytes. The problem I had was if I get my ketogenic state too high. So for me, it's the time I have tested it, I feel good between about 0.5 and 1 on the measure. I don't know what it is internationally, but over here, that's what it works out to be. I don't feel good at 4.5. So being highly ketogenic, I don't feel good. I feel anxious, but kind of tired, but kind of a bit edgy. I don't know how to describe it. I've met other people like this as well. Protein, as we know, is going to be a lot better at retaining muscle mass than fat because we're made of muscle. There's more protein in our muscle than there is fat. And it comes down to like I wouldn't say the law, but the guideline of the mass balance model, which Jeremy and I have made videos and talked about in quite a lot of detail. But then again, saying that, I did interview Robert Sykes, and he does this sort of technique. So he does more fat, less protein. I think they both work. I think at this point it comes down to individual preference. I don't think it's absolute. For me, my ratios, if it were, when I was doing my contest prep, was something like, I'd say it does like steepest. It was about 55% protein by caloric value, and about, I don't know, 4, 5, 6% carbs, and the rest was fat. So I wasn't really probably in a ketogenic state, but I still got shredded. So it tells you, depends where you're at. Now this year I'm going to be a bit more, I wouldn't say heavier on the fat, but I'm going to be a bit closer towards higher fat than higher protein perhaps. But I think you do have a set amount of protein we absolutely need. For most people, I think it's about 1.5 to 2 grams per kilo of muscle mass. I think going beyond that, it's very anecdotal, very individual. Some people might have leaky gut, intestinal permeability. Some people might just require more food. They have bigger appetites. They somehow need more amino acids. Maybe they've got some, I don't know, enzymatic process in their body that just requires more protein in it. I don't know. It's very loose science, very extrapolation based, very anecdotal based. Do you have much to add to that at all? I mean, I don't like the idea of percentages, obviously, because 20% of what? I'd rather someone say, 1 to 1 or 1 to 2 of, say, 200 protein or what have you.
Yeah, I tend to think in terms of muscle sparing. It's probably a range based on the individual and their activity level. I mean, if you're 100% fat diet would just be fasting or starvation. in which case Ben Bickman has spoken before about how basically if you have greater than like 10 to 12% body fat, you basically won't break down muscle in a fast at all. But to take that to the other extreme, depending on activity level, like marathon runners and endurance athletes often require more protein than bodybuilders because the muscle protein breakdown they have from the egregious levels of physical activity needs to be offset by more dietary protein coming in. Um, in terms of would theoretically deep ketosis be better at sparing muscle? Um, I mean, you could somewhat artificially inflate, your numbers on a ketone reader by just eating a lot of fat or even consuming exogenous ketones. Um, so I don't know. I would have to think about that a little bit, but like I said, I tend to think for most people there's probably a range. Um, for me, I mean, I've seen numbers on a blood ketone meter everywhere from like 1.5, which is the very low end of nutritional ketosis, to upwards of almost 5, which is like very, very deep ketosis, depending on what I'm doing with diet and fasting. And I haven't seen any muscle loss um, anywhere along that spectrum. But in general, because Jonathan and I are both big proponents of regular strength training for long term health and wellness, I think if somebody's engaging in any kind of resistance training, um, they generally probably want to have a little bit more than 20% protein. Um, I agree with Jonathan's recommendations in terms of protein intake. In general, I recommend 1 gram per pound of goal body weight, which is pretty close to Jonathan's recommendation of 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. That's kind of the upper limit. I usually tell people to try and just get kind of close to that. Um, but I'm going to give that question some more thought. And I appreciate you asking that because it's going to make me think for a while.
Yeah, I've already done the thinking on my end. I don't think there's an absolute answer because Robert Sykes got shredded doing that. I got shredded doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I think they both work. I'd say for a lot of people, they tend to feel better with a sufficient amount of fat in their body. So maybe that would translate to sleeping better, recovering better between workouts. Maybe you have a bit more energy in the gym. I don't know. I think it'd be impossible to measure. I think it's one of those things we'd have to get a lot more carnivore bodybuilders out there to sort of experiment with it and see where that line is. I think, like you kind of said, I think there probably is a middle point, like a bell curve. Robert Sykes here, me here. They both work. Most people are in the middle somewhere.
Well,
You
I
don't
think,
need 550 protein, guys.
yeah, I mean, you'd have to take a bunch of bodybuilders and basically put them in a metabolic ward and also test their activity levels and their strength training volume. If I had to put a range to it that I think is probably equally muscle sparing, I would say probably as high as 85% fat to as low as maybe 50% fat, 50% protein. I think I would probably say that broad of a range for most people is probably sufficient in terms of at least maintaining muscle mass through most forms of physical activity. And that broad of a range, I mean, we're talking that's upwards of like 3 grams of fat to 1 gram of protein. All the way to the other end of the spectrum is basically 2 grams of protein to 1 gram of fat. And I think if you're somewhere in there, you probably don't need to worry about it much more than that.
Yeah, I think ultimately, ketosis is ketosis. It's your body's doing something with the fat you're taking in. I'd be looking at everything else first before trying to find that number. You sort of experiment. So everything Jerome just said, and the bit in segment 4, experiment, see what happens. Creep up the protein, creep down the fat. Do that, vice versa. See where you end up each week. See what you prefer doing as well. What's easiest to adhere to, but still gets you results. Then, just out of curiosity, you might then test the ketone level on the meter. Probably not very accurate anyway. I've made talks on that before, and Bart K has as well. But you might say, okay, I land at this point right now. Okay, maybe in the future you do a fat loss phase again. Okay, I know I feel best. I need to land about here. But remember, feeling is subjective. How you go about your day and how you feel every day will change. It could be that a year from now you try the same intervention and it doesn't work. You feel like trash. So it's a moving target, this kind of bodybuilding thing. You can't replicate anything, I don't think.
Mhm.
I want to just quickly say hello to Steph. So this is the lady that I interviewed the other day. We might be doing some live segments at some point. So we're going to try and do an update every few weeks, maybe talk about carnivore bodybuilding preparation and everything that entails. But we're doing almost like a mini series. So it'll be quite informative. And she does have a YouTube channel and she has uploaded videos. She does long format videos. So check out her channel if you're currently listening to this. Just adding on to the point that Andre made earlier. So he said, I lost around 17 pounds in the first 6 weeks, but in the last 3 weeks, I've barely lost 2 pounds. I guess I'll have to increase my physical activity or start counting calories. Sorry to bothering again. No problem. I think that 2 pounds isn't necessarily a bad thing. Maybe you hold a bit of water. Goes back to what I said before. I think, find the right way to measure what your body's doing at that time. How do your clothes fit? That's a good one. That works quite well. It could be that it's just a bit harder for you to get that much leaner, I believe a sensible rate of loss is something like 0.5% of your body weight per week. So if you're 200 pounds, that's a pound a week. So yeah, 2 pounds over 3 weeks, not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you're a bit behind. It could be you've got what we call like the whoosh effect. So nothing will happen for a few weeks. This happens to me. I tend to disproportionately lose fat based on the diet that I have in. If I'm more active, perhaps I'm at Sophie's, we do more walks on with her. Yeah, my weight will just fall right off, but my appetite will go up in accordance with that. So all these things can change as well. In terms of like measurement or tracking things, I would do exactly what you're already doing. So you're eating going back to the post he made, eating, about half a kilo of meat, 7 or 8 eggs, stuff like that. Do that. Eat that same amount of meat, eat the same amount of eggs. Then maybe decrease the fat intake. So maybe you have, I don't know, they don't do lean eggs, do they? But apart from egg whites, so maybe just decrease the fat intake of the meat. So maybe you're not 20% ground beef, maybe 15%, or maybe if you want something less drastic, you do 250 grams, 20%, 250 grams, 15%, and just have that throughout the day. But yeah, I see no issue with the way you're currently tracking food. I think the most effective way to track food intake is to track food intake. Do you disagree with that statement at all? Or?
No, it's 100% correct. I know exactly where you're going with that.
Yeah.
And to kind of piggyback on what you were saying with hitting sticking points and whoosh effects, sometimes you could keep your food exactly the same for a long period of time and not see a change. And then, like Jonathan said, sometimes just it's like a dam broke and there's this big drop in weight all of a sudden. But the opposite is kind of true as well. Steak and Butter Gal has talked about it. Kelly Hogan has talked about people that have experienced this. The Baroness of Beef that was on earlier have talked about this. All of those ladies, and I tend to think it probably happens a little bit more with women than with men, have eaten the same thing and they've lost a bunch of weight, then their weight stays the same, then they've gained weight for a period of months, and then all of a sudden it just drops off again. The body's metabolism is constantly changing. Like Jonathan said, it's a sliding scale. It's a constantly shifting target in terms of activity and body composition and diet. But if you're moving in the right direction, I mean, 2 pounds in 3 weeks is great. Like you're going in the direction that you want to go. So if it's not as quick as you would like, I suppose you could look at making an adjustment. But if your energy is good and your output in the gym is good and you're moving in the direction, man, I would say you're doing everything right, and just keep holding that steady until you need to make an adjustment. But those are things that are better handled through consultations, namely with Jonathan. But I wouldn't beat yourself up about that at all. I mean, you're going in the direction that you want to go in, so you're doing a lot of things right.
You're not going backwards, Andre.
Exactly.
A lot of people struggle to even get on the diet to go anywhere forward. They're just stuck and cheat today. I can't quite handle, this much meat and this much eggs without my, I don't know, bar of chocolate or something, or peanuts. I don't know what people eat nowadays. But yeah, you see what I mean? You go, like Jeremy said, you're going in the right direction. It's just taking you a bit more time than what you'd hoped. But with that implementation of, reducing the fat content of your meat, perhaps just a little bit, that might make a massive difference. But yeah, just see how it goes. I'd be quite careful with the palpitations though. It could be that you need a bit of calcium in your diet. Maybe, I don't know. Perhaps you're splitting your food up too much. I don't know. Try lots of different things out. We've covered it quite extensively now. I think you just need to do something different to what you're currently doing if you wanted more results. And we've got it looks like a muscle man and a steak. I like that. Excellent. Thank you for joining. I assume that at the beginning, most of what I lost were water since I stopped eating carbs. I doubt of those 17 pounds, more than 5 or 6 were actually fat. My body fat went down like 2-3%. That's good. 2-3% is really good. It's taken me 2 weeks to lose that, and I'm a bodybuilder doing everything under the sun needed to get absolutely shredded out of my mind. Working really, really hard. So, yeah, that's not bad considering you've just made a very simple adjustment in your diet and lost inflammatory water weight, which your body does not want at all. Do you have any comments, Joe?
Yeah, just don't beat yourself up when you're actually winning.
Yeah. All right. Well, what should we do now, Jerome? Should we finish it up here? I think we've put the world to rights and been relatively helpful.
This has been a good run.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you around next week? Have you got a public holiday?
I should be around. I have to double check my daughter's school schedule, but should be around. A couple of weeks from now, there will be a Monday where I won't be on, but I'll let you know off camera.
Yeah, sure. Excellent. Yeah, I've noticed now with Maddie will be joining school or reception nursery in a few months. I'm like, okay, so two of the girls are going to be going to school. One of them is going to be going for half days, I think 2 or 3 times a week. There's going to be that many more meetings, that many more clubs. So I'm like, geez, we already take Tilly to like 4 clubs a week plus.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. I mean, the opportunities children have now is really, really good. I just hope that society moves in the right direction where we have less public holidays so we can get more of Jerome on.
Yeah, I'm inclined to draw the analog towards Rome. What was it? Something like when Rome fell, 6 out of 7 days were holidays or something like that. So I don't want to be all doom and gloom speaking about the nature and the state of the world, but yeah, I'll just keep it at that.
On that note, we have to subscribe to our Alias channel. Jerome and Jonathan ranting about stuff. It's not actually a channel, guys, but do subscribe to Jerome's channel if you have not yet already. It is Jerome Armstrong. You should find him in the description box as well. That's all for tonight, guys. Appreciate you, Jerome, coming on again. And we'll be back next week for segment number 67, which is 2/3 of the way to 100, or just a bit more.